Jasmine Robinson watches in horror as flight attendant Derek Harrison drags her 3 8-year-old daughters down the airplane aisle. His face contorts with rage as he spits on little Zara's cheek. Passengers' phones record everything, documenting his hatred. Seconds later, the plane violently lurches sideways, sending everyone into chaos. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their race, hit that like button and subscribe to support more stories that expose injustice. Now, let's rewind 24 hours to see how this nightmare began. Dr. Jasmine Robinson checked her luggage one last time before zipping it closed. At 35, she had become an expert at efficient packing, a skill necessary for her fast-paced life as one of the country's leading pediatric surgeons. But this trip was different. She wasn't just traveling for work. She was bringing her 8-year-old triplet daughters along for the first time. Maya, Zara, Imani, are you ready? We need to leave. In 20 minutes, Jasmine called upstairs, checking her watch. Boston awaited them. Specifically, the International Pediatric Surgical Conference, where she would present her groundbreaking research on minimally invasive techniques for congenital heart defects in children from underserved communities. The patter of excited feet came bounding down the stairs as her 3 daughters appeared, each wheeling a small suitcase that Jasmine had helped them pack the night before. "Mommy, will we see snow in Boston?" Imani asked her, dark eyes wide with excitement. As the youngest of the triplets by 4 minutes, she was often the most inquisitive. "I can't promise, sweetheart. It's only November, but there might be some early snowfall," Jasmine replied, adjusting the purple bow in her daughter's braided hair. Maya, the oldest and most practical of the 3, was already by the door. "I packed my gloves just in case," she announced proudly. Zara, always caught between her sister's different personalities, spun around in her new traveling outfit. "I've never been on an airplane before. Are we going to sit by the window?" Jasmine smiled, her heart full as she looked at her daughters. "Even better. We're sitting in first class." The girls squealed with delight. Jasmine had splurged on the tickets, wanting their first flight to be special. As a single mother who had worked her way up from a childhood in one of Atlanta's toughest neighborhoods, she knew the value of creating positive memories. Her own mother had raised her alone after her father's death, instilling in her a fierce determination to succeed despite the obstacles society placed in front of Black women pursuing medicine. Throughout medical school and her surgical residency, Jasmine had faced countless microaggressions and blatant discrimination. Patients who requested a real doctor, colleagues who attributed her success to affirmative action rather than the fact that she graduated top of her class, and supervisors who held her to impossibly higher standards than her white peers. But she had persevered, eventually becoming one of the youngest chiefs of pediatric surgery at Atlanta Memorial Hospital. When she discovered she was pregnant with triplets during the final year of her fellowship, many people expected her to scale back her ambitions. Instead, she built a support network, bought a modest home close to the hospital, and continued her revolutionary research, often working on manuscripts during late-night feedings. Now, as they loaded their luggage into the Uber, Jasmine reminded her daughters of the rules they had practiced. "Remember, girls, what do we do on the airplane? Stay in our seats unless we need the bathroom," Imani recited. "Use our indoor voices," added Maya. "And be extra polite to everyone." Zara finished with a smile that revealed a missing front tooth. "That's right. This is an important trip for Mommy, and I'm so proud to have my 3 best girls with me." The drive to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was filled with the girls' excited chatter. Jasmine had prepared them thoroughly for the security procedures, not wanting them to be frightened. What she hadn't prepared them for, however, was the random selection her family would face for additional screening. "Ma'am, you and your children have been selected for additional security screening," the TSA agent announced as they approached the checkpoint. Jasmine felt a familiar tightening in her chest, but kept her face neutral for her daughter's sake. "Of course," she said calmly, though she noted that none of the white families with children had been pulled aside. The additional screening took nearly 20 minutes. The TSA agents opened all their carefully packed bags, patted down all three girls despite their confused expressions, and repeatedly questioned Jasmine about their travel plans. "Mommy, why are they only checking us?" whispered Maya, always observant. "Sometimes they do extra checks to keep everyone safe," Jasmine explained quietly, not wanting to burden her 8-year-old with the reality of racial profiling. By the time they reached the gate, the first-class passengers were already boarding. Jasmine presented their boarding passes to the gate agent, a young man with a friendly smile. "First class for 4. Have a wonderful flight," he said, genuinely warm as he scanned their tickets. But as they approached the aircraft door, they encountered Derek Harrison for the first time. The flight attendant, a tall man in his 40s, with thinning blonde hair and cold blue eyes, looked at their boarding passes with obvious skepticism. "First class?" he asked, examining their tickets much more closely than he had for the passengers ahead of them. "Yes, seats 3A through 3D, Jasmine confirmed politely. Derek looked from the tickets to the family multiple times, his expression making it clear he found something amiss about their presence in first class. "These are children's tickets," he questioned, though the boarding passes clearly indicated child fares for the girls. "Yes, my daughters are traveling with me to Boston," Jasmine explained, maintaining her professional composure, though she felt her daughters moving closer to her, sensing the tension. "I'll need to verify these," Derek said, taking all 4 boarding passes to the front galley where another flight attendant was preparing welcome drinks. Jasmine watched as he showed the tickets to his colleagues, speaking in hushed tones while glancing back at them multiple times. The other flight attendant, a Latina woman whose name tag read Gabriela Rodriguez, frowned at whatever Derek was saying and promptly handed the boarding passes back to him. After what seemed like an unnecessarily long verification, Derek returned and reluctantly gestured for them to board. "Seats are on the left," he said curtly, without the warm welcome he had offered to previous passengers. As they made their way to their seats, Jasmine felt Maya's small hand slip into hers. Her daughter didn't need to say anything. Jasmine knew she had noticed the difference in treatment. With a gentle squeeze of reassurance, she helped her girls find their seats, determined not to let anyone dim the excitement of their first flight together. What Jasmine didn't know was that this initial encounter was just the beginning of what would become the most harrowing flight of their lives. The first-class cabin of Flight 1382 to Boston was elegantly appointed, with spacious leather seats arranged in a 2x2 configuration. Jasmine settled Imani and Zara in the window and aisle seats of row 3, while she and Maya took the corresponding seats across the aisle. The girls' eyes widened at the sight of personal entertainment screens and the extra legroom. "Is this really where we're sitting, Mommy?" Zara whispered in awe, running her small hand over the soft leather armrest. "Yes, baby." "Special trip, special seats." Jasmine smiled, helping her daughter with the seatbelt. As other first-class passengers boarded, Jasmine observed flight attendant Derek Harrison's interactions. With white passengers, his demeanor transformed, offering warm greetings, helping with bags, and providing pre-flight beverage options with a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Good morning, sir. May I hang your jacket? What can I get you to drink before takeoff?" he asked an older white businessman who took the seat in front of Maya. When a white couple with a teenage daughter boarded, Derek personally ensured their comfort. "The Thompson family, welcome aboard. I've got you in row 2. Can I bring you anything to make your flight more comfortable today?" 10 minutes passed, and Derek had greeted every first-class passenger except Jasmine and her daughters. Gabriela Rodriguez, the other flight attendant working first class, noticed the omission and approached their row. "Hello there. First flight," she asked the girls warmly, her dark eyes crinkling with genuine friendliness. All 3 nodded enthusiastically. "Would you ladies like some apple juice or water before takeoff?" Gabriela offered. "Yes, please, apple juice," the triplets replied, almost in unison. "And for you, ma'am," Gabriela turned to Jasmine. "Water would be perfect, thank you." As Gabriela walked away to prepare their drinks, Jasmine overheard Derek speaking to another crew member near the galley. "Can you believe they booked those people in first? Probably using some kind of welfare miles," he muttered, just loud enough for Jasmine to hear. The other crew member looked uncomfortable and moved away without responding. Jasmine felt her jaw tighten but remained silent. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered such attitudes, and she wouldn't let it ruin her daughter's experience. Gabriella returned with their drinks, shooting an apologetic glance at Jasmine that suggested she was aware of her colleague's behavior. The girls thanked her politely, carefully holding their cups as they'd been instructed. "You have such well-behaved daughters," Gabriella commented. "First flight, and they're already pros." "Thank you," Jasmine replied, appreciating the kindness. "They've been looking forward to this for weeks." The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming passengers and announcing a flight time of 2 hours and 20 minutes to Boston, with some expected turbulence along the eastern seaboard. "Due to the forecasted conditions, we'll be keeping the seatbelt sign on for most of the flight today," the captain explained. "Flight attendants prepare for departure." Derek moved through the cabin, checking seatbelts and overhead bins. When he reached their row, he barely glanced at them, giving the briefest check of their seatbelts, without the verbal confirmations he'd offered other passengers. His eyes narrowed slightly at the girls' juice cups. "Those need to be finished before takeoff," he said sharply, ignoring the fact that the white teenager across the aisle was still nursing a full orange juice. The girls, sensing his tone, quickly finished their drinks. Maya, always protective of her sisters, collected their empty cups and handed them to Derek with a polite "thank you." He took the cups without acknowledgement and continued down the aisle. As the aircraft pushed back from the gate, Jasmine noticed the triplets' excitement had dimmed somewhat. She reached across the aisle to squeeze Maya's hand, then turned to check on Zara and Imani. "Who wants to play our cloud game once we're in the air?" she suggested, referring to their favorite car game adapted for flying. Their faces brightened immediately, and Jasmine felt a surge of protective love. She wouldn't allow anyone's prejudice to steal their joy. The plane taxied toward the runway, joining a queue of aircraft waiting for takeoff. During this time, the flight attendants began their safety demonstration. Gabriella demonstrated the proper use of seatbelts and oxygen masks with professional efficiency, while Derek distributed safety cards to every row except theirs. When the safety demonstration concluded, Gabriella noticed the oversight and quickly brought them their safety cards with another apologetic smile. Takeoff was smooth, the powerful engines propelling them down the runway and lifting the aircraft into the morning sky. The girls gasped in delight. As Atlanta grew smaller beneath them, the cityscape transforming into a miniature model. Once they reached cruising altitude, the beverage service began. Derek started from the front of the first-class cabin, taking orders and serving drinks with practiced efficiency, until he reached their row. He skipped them entirely, continuing to serve passengers in the rows behind. When Jasmine raised her hand to get his attention, he deliberately avoided eye contact. After serving the last row in first class, he disappeared into the galley, without acknowledging them. An elderly white woman seated in 1B who had been watching the situation unfold pressed her call button. When Gabriella responded, the woman said, loudly enough for others to hear, "I believe the family in row 3 was overlooked during the beverage service." Gabriella immediately approached their row. "I'm so sorry. What can I get for you?" "Water for me and apple juice for the girls, please," Jasmine replied, nodding gratefully to the elderly passenger who gave her a small, knowing smile in return. When Gabriella returned with their drinks, Derek watched from the galley with barely concealed disdain. Tensions between the crew members became visibly apparent as Gabriella said something to him that made his face flush red. The captain's voice came over the intercom again. "Flight attendants, please be seated. We're approaching an area of moderate turbulence." As the seatbelt sign illuminated, Jasmine noticed Zara wince and reach for her ear. "What's wrong, sweetie?" she asked across the aisle. "My ear hurts," Mommy Zara replied, her voice strained. "It feels like it's going to pop." Jasmine recognized the symptoms of airplane ear, a painful condition caused by pressure changes during flight. She reached into her purse for a pack of gum, a common remedy to help equalize ear pressure, but realized she'd packed it in her carry-on bag in the overhead compartment. The turbulence increased, making it unsafe to stand. Zara's discomfort was clearly growing, tears forming in her eyes as she held her ear. As the next hour unfolded, the subtle hostility from Derek became increasingly obvious to everyone around them. The flight attendant's behavior wasn't just poor customer service, it was a deliberate targeting of the only black family in the premium cabin. And as the plane continued its journey toward Boston, neither Jasmine nor her daughters could have anticipated how much worse things would get. The aircraft pitched and rolled as it encountered the forecasted turbulence. Zara's ear pain intensified, tears now streaming down her face as she clutched the side of her head. Jasmine, strapped in across the aisle due to the seatbelt sign, felt helpless as her daughter suffered. "Maya, can you reach into my purse and see if there's any pain relief medicine?" Jasmine asked her daughter seated beside her. The turbulence had momentarily lessened, though the seatbelt sign remained illuminated. Maya carefully searched through her mother's purse. "I don't see any, Mom." Jasmine pressed the call button, hoping to request some children's pain reliever from the flight attendants. 2 minutes passed. 5 minutes. The call button remained unanswered, while Zara continued to whimper in pain. Finally, Derek Harrison walked through the cabin, checking seatbelts. He glanced at their illuminated call button, but continued past their row without acknowledging it. "Excuse me," Jasmine called firmly. "My daughter is in pain. Do you have any children's ibuprofen on board?" Derek turned slowly, his expression impassive. "The seatbelt sign is on. I'll check, once it's safe to move about the cabin." "She's in considerable pain," Jasmine persisted. "It would only take a moment to—" "Regulations state that while the seatbelt sign is on, we cannot distribute medication," he interrupted his tone, suggesting he was reciting policy rather than expressing genuine concern. "You should have prepared for this possibility before boarding." The elderly white woman in 1B who had helped them earlier turned around in her seat. "Young man, I've been flying for 40 years and I've never heard such nonsense. Help the child." Derek's jaw tightened visibly. "Ma'am, I'm following protocol." "No, you're not," came Gabriella's voice as she appeared beside him with a first aid kit. "We can administer basic medication during turbulence if a passenger is in distress." She looked at Derek with barely concealed disgust before turning to Jasmine. "I have children's acetaminophen. Is she allergic to any medications?" "No allergies," Jasmine replied gratefully. "Thank you." Gabriella carefully measured the liquid medication and crossed the aisle to administer it to Zara along with a cup of water. "This should help soon, sweetheart. Try swallowing or yawning to help with the pressure." Derek stood rigid, clearly angry at being contradicted. "The turbulence is increasing. You need to return to your station," he told Gabriella curtly. "Just making sure our passengers are comfortable," Gabriella replied pointedly before returning to the galley. By now, several passengers were openly watching the interactions. A businessman in 4A made eye contact with Jasmine and shook his head slightly, silently communicating his disapproval of Derek's behavior. The elderly woman from 1B unbuckled her seatbelt during a momentary lull in the turbulence and made her way to Jasmine's row despite the illuminated sign. "I'm Eleanor Thompson," she introduced herself, resting a hand on the back of the seat. "My late husband was a commercial pilot for 35 years. What that man is doing," she nodded toward the galley where Derek stood, "is not procedure. It's prejudice." "Thank you," Jasmine responded quietly. "Unfortunately, it's not an unfamiliar experience." "Well, it's unacceptable," Eleanor stated firmly. "I'll be writing to the airline about this." Derek appeared beside them almost immediately. "Ma'am, you need to return to your seat. The seatbelt sign is on." "I'm aware," Eleanor replied calmly. "I was just checking on this child since the flight attendant wouldn't." "That's not true," Derek said, his voice rising slightly. "I explained that safety protocols—" "Oh, save it," Eleanor interrupted. "I watched you serve medication to the gentleman in 2C not 10 minutes ago while the sign was on. The difference is quite obvious to everyone here." Several passengers murmured in agreement, and Derek's face flushed with anger. "Return to your seat immediately, or I'll have to report you to the captain for interfering with a flight attendant's duties," he threatened. Eleanor held his gaze for a long moment. before slowly making her way back to her seat, patting Jasmine's shoulder as she passed. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're continuing to experience moderate turbulence. Our weather radar shows conditions worsening ahead, so all passengers and crew must remain seated with seatbelts fastened. We'll update you as conditions change." The plane jolted violently, causing several passengers to gasp. Zara, still in pain despite the medication, whimpered and reached across the aisle toward her mother. "It's okay, baby," Jasmine reassured her. "The medicine will start working soon." Derek walked through the cabin again, ostensibly checking that everyone was complying with the seatbelt sign. When he reached their row, he leaned down toward Jasmine. "Control your children," he said in a low voice. "They're making other passengers uncomfortable." Jasmine looked around, seeing nothing but sympathy from nearby passengers, many of whom had children of their own. "My daughters are perfectly behaved, especially considering one is in pain," she replied, evenly maintaining her composure. "The only person creating discomfort here is you." Derek's face hardened. "Listen, I don't know how you got these seats, but I purchased them," Jasmine cut in her voice, still calm but firm. "Just like everyone else on this plane. Is there a problem?" Gabriella had appeared again, her expression concerned. "No problem," Derek replied coldly. "Just ensuring all passengers understand flight regulations." As he walked away, Gabriella lingered. "I'm so sorry about this," she whispered. "I've never seen him act this way before." "I have," Jasmine replied simply. As the flight progressed, the medication began to take effect, and Zara's pain subsided. The turbulence, however, continued to worsen. Drink service remained suspended, but Gabriella discreetly brought water to Jasmine and the girls while Derek was occupied in the rear galley. The tension in the first-class cabin was palpable. Several passengers had begun recording interactions on their phones, sensing that something beyond poor service was unfolding. Derek's behavior grew increasingly erratic, his professionalism crumbling as he realized passengers were documenting his actions. When the plane suddenly dropped several hundred feet in an air pocket, causing screams throughout the cabin, Derek used the moment of chaos to approach their row again. "This is exactly why children shouldn't be in first class," he muttered, just loud enough for Jasmine to hear. "They're not equipped to handle emergency situations." Jasmine noticed that Maya had her small tablet out the video recording function, active, capturing Derek's every word. Her 8-year-old daughter had recognized what was happening and had the presence of mind to document it. Jasmine felt simultaneous pride in Maya's awareness and profound sadness that her child already understood the need to protect herself from racial discrimination. The storm clouds outside darkened the cabin as they flew deeper into the weather system. What had begun as uncomfortable tension was rapidly becoming a dangerous situation, with Derek's animosity growing more overt by the minute. Jasmine realized she needed to alert the captain to the increasingly hostile environment, but with the seatbelt sign illuminated and Derek watching their every move, she wasn't sure how to proceed. What she didn't know was that the confrontation was about to reach a breaking point that would change the course of their journey in ways none of them could have anticipated. After nearly an hour of continuous turbulence, the captain finally turned off the seatbelt sign. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've found a smoother altitude. You may now move about the cabin, though we recommend keeping your seatbelts fastened when seated." Relief washed over the first-class cabin. Passengers stretched and shifted in their seats after being confined for so long. Imani, the youngest of the triplets, immediately looked to her mother with urgency in her eyes. "Mommy, I need to use the bathroom," she whispered across the aisle. Jasmine nodded. "Go ahead, sweetie. Do you want me to come with you?" "I can go by myself," Imani insisted, showing her independence. At 8, the girls were well practiced in doing things for themselves, a necessary skill for triplets of a busy single mother. Imani unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped into the aisle carefully, making her way toward the first-class lavatory. Derek, who had been arranging items in the galley, emerged just as Imani approached. He stepped directly into her path, blocking her access to the bathroom. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded. Imani, startled by his harsh tone, pointed timidly toward the lavatory. "I need to use the bathroom, please." "The bathroom in coach is for children," Derek stated, gesturing toward the back of the plane. "First-class lavatories are for first-class adult passengers." Several passengers looked up in disbelief. There was no such policy on any airline, and everyone knew it. Jasmine was on her feet instantly.
"Excuse me, my daughter is a first-class passenger, and she will use the first-class lavatory."
Derek turned to Jasmine, his expression cold. "Ma'am, I'm trying to manage passenger flow. The rear lavatories are more appropriate for children." "That's not airline policy," Jasmine replied firmly. "Now please step aside so my daughter can use the restroom." "If you continue to be disruptive, I'll have to." "She's being disruptive," interrupted Eleanor Thompson from her seat. "You're denying a child access to the bathroom based on some made-up rule." Other passengers began to voice their agreement. "This is ridiculous," said a businessman from 4A. "Let the child use the bathroom," called another passenger. Faced with the unified response from passengers, Derek reluctantly stepped aside. Imani hurried past him into the lavatory, her small shoulders hunched with stress. Jasmine remained standing, her medical training kicking in as she recognized the symptoms of escalating stress in her own body. Increased heart rate, shallow breathing, hypervigilance. She took a deep breath, centering herself. "I'd like to speak with the captain," she stated clearly. "The captain is flying the aircraft," Derek replied dismissively. "He can't be disturbed for customer service complaints." "This isn't about customer service," Jasmine countered. "This is about discriminatory treatment of passengers, which is a safety concern." Phones were out now, recording the confrontation. Derek noticed and became visibly agitated. "Put those phones away," he demanded. "Recording crew members is against regulations." "Actually, it's not," said the businessman from 4A who had been documenting the entire exchange. "Federal aviation regulations don't prohibit passengers from recording non-sensitive areas of the aircraft or crew interactions." Derek's composure finally shattered. "You people always think you know everything, don't you?" he snapped at Jasmine. "Just because you managed to buy a first-class ticket doesn't mean you belong here. Some of us had to work hard to earn our positions." The cabin fell silent at his outburst. Even Derek seemed momentarily shocked by his own words. Gabriella rushed forward from the rear galley. "Derek, that's enough," she said firmly. "I'm calling the captain." "Do you have any idea who you're talking to?" Eleanor asked, her voice cutting through the tension. "This woman is Dr. Jasmine Robinson, one of the top pediatric surgeons in the country. I recognized her from a medical journal my grandson showed me. She's saved countless children's lives." Derek's face reddened further, but he was too far gone to back down now. "I don't care if she's the Surgeon General. On this aircraft, passengers need to know their place and follow instructions." "Their place?" Gabriella repeated incredulously. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Imani emerged from the bathroom, tears in her eyes, as she rushed back to her seat beside Zara. Maya had moved across the aisle to sit with her sisters, all three huddled together. Derek turned to the triplets. "See what your behavior has caused. You're disrupting the entire flight." "That's enough," Jasmine's voice took on the authoritative tone she used in emergency surgeries. "My daughters have done absolutely nothing wrong. They have followed every rule, been polite and well-behaved, despite your continuous harassment. I will not allow you to bully children because of your personal prejudices." Passengers throughout first class began to applaud, many still recording the confrontation. What's your reaction to Derek's behavior so far? Comment number 1 if you think he should be immediately removed from his position. Like this video if you believe no child should ever be treated this way because of their race. Subscribe to follow this family's journey to justice. Do you think Derek's behavior is isolated or part of a bigger problem in our society? How would you have responded in Jasmine's position? The situation is about to escalate even further, and what happens next will shock you. As applause faded, the atmosphere in the first-class cabin crackled with tension. Derek stood rigid, his face contorted with fury as he surveyed the passengers who had turned against him. Jasmine remained standing, positioned protectively between her daughters and the flight attendant. "I'm going to have to ask you to return to your seat," Dr. Robinson Derrick said, emphasizing her title with mocking derision. "You're interfering with my duties." "I'll sit when you acknowledge your behavior and apologize to my daughters," Jasmine replied calmly. Before Derrick could respond, the plane encountered sudden turbulence again. The aircraft lurched violently, and the captain immediately switched on the seatbelt sign. The intercom crackled. "Flight attendants, take your seats immediately." In the momentary chaos, the drink cart that Derrick had failed to secure properly broke free from its locked position. It rolled forward, gaining momentum down the aisle. "Look out!" shouted a passenger. Gabriella lunged to grab it but couldn't reach it in time. Jasmine pivoted quickly, using her body to shield her daughters as the heavy cart slammed into the row divider, just inches from where they sat. Beverages spilled across the aisle, ice cubes scattering across the carpet. Despite the narrow miss, the triplets remained calmly buckled in their seats, exactly as they had been instructed. Derrick, rather than addressing the safety hazard he had created, immediately seized on the opportunity to shift blame. "This is exactly what happens when children are allowed to cause distractions," he shouted over the noise of the turbulence. "If everyone had stayed in their assigned seats, this wouldn't have happened." The absurdity of his claim was apparent to everyone. Gabriella, now securing the cart properly, shot him an incredulous look. "Derrick, they were in their seats." "You left the cart unsecured," she stated firmly. Several passengers voiced their agreement, pointing out that the girls had been perfectly behaved throughout the flight. But Derrick was beyond reason now, his prejudice fully exposed. As Jasmine carefully made her way back to her seat, she noticed Maya's breathing becoming labored. The stress of the confrontation had triggered her asthma, a condition she had managed since she was a toddler. "Maya, where's your inhaler?" Jasmine asked, immediately shifting into doctor mode. "In my backpack," Maya wheezed, pointing to the overhead compartment. The pink one. The turbulence had intensified, but Jasmine couldn't wait. She unbuckled her seatbelt again and stood, reaching for the overhead bin. Derrick appeared beside her instantly. "Sit down immediately. The seatbelt sign is on." "My daughter is having an asthma attack," Jasmine explained, continuing to reach for the compartment. "I need her medication." Without warning, Derrick physically grabbed Jasmine's arm, yanking her away from the bin. "You're endangering this flight," he shouted. "Sit down now, or I'll have you restrained." Gasps echoed throughout the cabin. Several passengers unbuckled, ready to intervene. "Get your hands off her," Eleanor Thompson shouted. "You're the danger here, not her," added the businessman from 4A. Gabriella pushed past Derrick and quickly opened the overhead bin, locating the pink backpack. "Is this it?" she asked Jasmine, who nodded gratefully. Within seconds, Gabriella had retrieved the inhaler and handed it to Maya, who took 2 desperate puffs. The medication began working quickly, her breathing gradually normalizing. Derrick stood watching, his rage visibly building as Gabriella directly contradicted his orders. "You're undermining my authority," he hissed at her. "I'm preventing a medical emergency," Gabriella shot back. "Something you were willing to allow because of your prejudice." The intercom crackled again, this time with urgency. "This is Captain Wilson. All crew members report to stations immediately. Prepare for emergency descent protocols." A new tension filled the cabin, not from the human conflict, but from genuine concern about the flight's status. The plane had begun a noticeable descent, and the fastened seatbelt signs were now accompanied by illuminated no smoking signs blinking with unusual intensity. "What's happening?" Zara asked, fearfully clutching her sister's hands. Jasmine, now seated and buckled between Maya and the aisle, tried to reassure them. "The pilots are just being cautious because of the weather. Everything will be fine." Derrick and Gabriella disappeared into the forward galley, presumably to communicate with the cockpit. The passengers could hear raised voices but couldn't make out what was being said. When Derrick emerged, his demeanor had shifted from anger to a bizarre, almost triumphant expression. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, "due to a potential safety situation, the captain has ordered special seating arrangements. Families with children will be moved to the rear of the aircraft for proper weight distribution." Passengers exchanged confused glances. Weight distribution was handled before takeoff, not mid-flight, and certainly not by separating families. That's not a real protocol, Eleanor stated loudly. I was married to a pilot for decades, and there's no such procedure. Derek ignored her approaching Jasmine's row. Your children need to come with me to the back of the plane. Absolutely not, Jasmine replied firmly. My daughters stay with me. This isn't a request, Derek insisted, his voice taking on a threatening edge. It's a direct order from the captain for the safety of everyone on board. Jasmine looked toward Gabriella, who shook her head slightly, confirming the lie. I don't believe you, Jasmine stated calmly. And I will not allow my children to be separated from me. Derek reached across Jasmine and began unbuckling Imani's seatbelt. This isn't up for discussion. Passengers erupted in protest. Several stood despite the seatbelt sign moving toward the confrontation. Jasmine placed her hand firmly over Derek's, stopping him from touching her daughter further. Remove your hand from my child immediately, she said, her voice deadly calm. For a moment it seemed Derek might back down. Then, with sudden determination, he reached across and forcefully unbuckled all three girls. You three come with me now. Captain's orders. The triplets looked to their mother in confusion and fear. Stay in your seats, Jasmine instructed them firmly. Derek leaned in close to Jasmine. Either they come voluntarily or I'll have the air marshal remove all four of you from the flight when we land. There is no air marshal on this flight, Gabriella interjected, having overheard his threat. Derek ignored her and reached for Zara's arm, pulling her from her seat with unnecessary force. Seeing their sister being manhandled, Maya and Imani reluctantly stood, not wanting Zara to be alone. Stop this immediately, Jasmine demanded, trying to reach her daughters. A uniformed man appeared suddenly, placing a restraining hand on Jasmine's shoulder. Ma'am, please remain seated. Who are you? Jasmine demanded. Flight Marshal Davis, the man replied. I need you to calm down and stay in your seat. He's taking my children, Jasmine protested. The marshal, who had only responded to a call about a disturbance without understanding the context, firmly guided Jasmine back into her seat. Let the crew do their jobs, ma'am. Derek, seizing the opportunity created by the marshal's intervention, began leading the frightened triplets down the aisle toward the economy section. This is wrong, Eleanor shouted, as several passengers continued recording. Those children are being separated from their mother for no reason, called another passenger. The triplets looked back at their mother with terrified expressions as Derek pushed them forward down the aisle. Jasmine struggled against the marshal's grip, trying desperately to explain the situation. Please, you don't understand what's happening, she pleaded with the marshal. He's targeting my family because of our race. My daughters have done nothing wrong. The marshal, beginning to sense that something was amiss, looked around at the other passengers who were nodding in agreement with Jasmine. She's telling the truth, the businessman from 4, a confirmed showing the marshal video evidence on his phone. The flight attendant has been harassing this family since boarding. As understanding dawned on the marshal's face, chaos erupted in the cabin. The plane experienced another violent bout of turbulence, and a new emergency was about to unfold. The aircraft lurched violently to the right, sending Derek stumbling against the seats. He maintained his grip on Zara's arm, pulling her roughly to keep his balance. The triplets cried out in fear as the oxygen masks suddenly deployed from the ceiling, compartments swinging wildly in front of every passenger. A computerized voice echoed through the cabin. Oxygen masks have deployed. Pull mask toward you, place over nose and mouth, secure with elastic band, breathe normally. The cabin pressure had destabilized. Passengers scrambled to secure their masks while simultaneously trying to make sense of the dual emergencies unfolding: the technical aircraft issue and the human crisis involving the Robinson family. This is your fault, Derek shouted over the noise, still gripping Zara's arm as he glared back at Jasmine. Your disruption distracted the flight crew. Gabriella pushed past him, grabbing oxygen masks for the frightened triplets.
Stop it, Derek! Get your mask on, and let these children return to their mother.
I'm following protocol, Derek insisted, his voice muffled as he pulled his own mask over his face with his free hand. These children need to be separated for safety reasons. There is no such protocol, Gabriella shouted back, securing masks on Maya and Imani. You're endangering these children. The plane dipped suddenly, sending everyone lurching forward. The cabin lights flickered ominously. Flight Marshal Davis, now fully aware of the situation, moved toward Derek. Release the child immediately, he ordered. I was misinformed about the situation. Derek ignored him, continuing to drag Zara down the aisle, while her sisters followed reluctantly, not wanting to be separated from each other. Passengers in economy class looked on in confusion and alarm as the first-class flight attendant forcibly moved 3 young children through the cabin during an emergency descent. Back in first class, Jasmine had secured her oxygen mask, but remained standing, desperate to reach her daughters. Please, she begged the marshal, help my children. Eleanor Thompson and several other passengers had also stood oxygen masks in place, forming a group of concerned witnesses. Eleanor's phone was still recording despite the emergency. Everyone, please remain seated. With your oxygen masks on, came the captain's voice over the intercom, tension evident in his tone. We are initiating an emergency descent to 10,000 feet to stabilize cabin pressure. Flight attendants report status. Gabriella rushed to the intercom. Captain, we have a serious situation in the cabin. Flight attendant Harrison is forcibly separating children from their mother during the emergency. There was a momentary pause before the captain responded. All passengers must be returned to their assigned seats immediately. Attendant Harrison, report to the galley intercom. Derek had reached the middle of the economy section with Zara still in his grip and her sisters following in distress. The economy passengers, already frightened by the oxygen mask deployment, watched in shocked confusion. Sir, those children should be with their parent, said a woman in an aisle seat, her voice muffled by her mask. Mind your business, Derek snapped. This is a safety procedure. Zara, overwhelmed by fear, began to sob uncontrollably.
Mommy, I want my mommy.
Maya, always the protector of her siblings, suddenly reached up and pulled Derek's arm. Let my sister go. Derek's control finally shattered completely. With the plane in emergency descent and the cabin in crisis, he turned to Maya and did the unthinkable. He spat directly at her face, the spittle landing on her cheek just below her oxygen mask. Don't you dare touch me, he hissed. A collective gasp rose from the passengers who witnessed this assault on an 8-year-old child. Multiple phones recorded the moment despite the emergency situation. An economy class passenger, a tall man in his 30s, stood immediately. That's assault on a minor, he stated firmly, pulling his mask aside momentarily to speak clearly. Let these children go now. Others joined him standing, despite the emergency protocols. The atmosphere had shifted from fear to outrage. Passengers united across class divisions in defense of the Robinson children. Derek found himself surrounded by angry passengers still gripping Zara's arm as the plane continued its rapid descent. For a moment, indecision flickered across his face. Then, with sudden, violent turbulence, the aircraft lurched sideways. Derek lost his balance and his grip on Zara. The child immediately ran to her sisters. The 3 of them, huddling together as passengers, created a protective barrier around them. The intercom crackled again. This is Captain Wilson. All crew must report to emergency stations immediately. We will be landing in Cleveland in approximately 15 minutes. The revelation that they were diverting to Cleveland rather than continuing to Boston confirmed the seriousness of the situation. What had begun as routine turbulence had escalated into a full emergency landing. Derek, regaining his balance, looked around at the hostile faces surrounding him. His authority had evaporated, replaced by collective outrage at his behavior. Flight Marshal Davis had made his way into the economy section and approached Derek with a stern expression. Sir, I'm officially relieving you of your duties under Federal Air Regulation 91.11 for interfering with crew members in performance of their duties, the Marshal stated. Return to the forward galley immediately. Derek's face contorted with rage.
You can't do that. I'm the senior flight attendant.
Not anymore, came a commanding voice from behind them. Captain Anthony Wilson stood in the aisle, having emerged from the cockpit during this critical phase of flight. something that only happened in the most serious of circumstances. Tall and imposing in his uniform, the captain's expression was one of controlled fury as he surveyed the scene. "What I'm seeing is a serious breach of safety protocols and passenger rights," Captain Wilson stated. "Mr. Harrison, you are relieved of duty, effective immediately. Return to the forward galley and remain seated for the duration of the flight." Passengers applauded despite the emergency situation. "Captain, these children were disrupting," Derek began. "Enough," the captain cut him off. "I've reviewed the cabin footage from our security system. I saw exactly what happened." He turned to the triplets, his voice softening. "Let's get you back to your mother." With gentle authority, Captain Wilson escorted the triplets back toward first class, where Jasmine waited anxiously. The reunion was emotional, Jasmine embracing her daughters with tears streaming down her face as they reached her. "Are you okay? Did he hurt you?" she asked frantically, checking them for injuries. "He spit on Maya," Zara reported, still trembling. "And he squeezed my arm really hard." Captain Wilson's expression darkened further at this information. "I assure you, ma'am, this will be fully investigated and addressed upon landing." As the captain returned to the cockpit to manage the emergency landing, Gabriella ensured the Robinson family was properly secured in their seats. The oxygen masks had retracted as the aircraft reached a safer altitude, but the seatbelt signs remained illuminated as they began their approach to Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. Derek sat isolated in the forward jump seat, his career effectively over. The passengers, despite the frightening circumstances, had witnessed something powerful. A community coming together across racial and class lines to protect children from discrimination and abuse. Eleanor Thompson reached across the aisle to squeeze Jasmine's hand. "You have remarkable daughters," she said softly, "and you handled this with such strength." Jasmine, emotionally exhausted, but relieved to have her children safe beside her, simply nodded in gratitude. As the plane descended toward Cleveland, emergency vehicles could be seen gathering on the tarmac below, not just for the aircraft's technical emergency, but for the human crisis that had unfolded at 30,000 feet. The engines roared as Captain Wilson skillfully guided the Boeing 737 toward Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. Through the windows, passengers could see emergency vehicles positioned along the runway, their lights flashing against the gray afternoon sky. Inside the cabin, an uneasy calm had settled after the chaos. Jasmine held Maya close, her other arm wrapped around Zara and Amani, who were squeezed together in the adjacent seat. The girls were quiet, now emotionally drained from their ordeal, but safe in their mother's embrace. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Wilson. We're on final approach to Cleveland. Our emergency landing is precautionary due to cabin pressurization issues. Please remain in your brace positions until we come to a complete stop." The passengers complied, leaning forward with their heads against the seats in front of them. In the forward jump seat, Derek Harrison sat rigidly, his face unreadable as he stared at the cabin floor. Gabriela Rodriguez moved efficiently through the cabin, checking that everyone was properly positioned for landing. "You're being very brave," Jasmine whispered to her daughters. "Everything's going to be okay now." Maya looked up at her mother, tear tracks still visible on her cheeks where Derek's saliva had been wiped away. "Why did he hate us so much, Mom? We didn't do anything." The question broke Jasmine's heart. At 8 years old, her daughters were confronting the ugly reality of racism more directly than ever before. As a mother, she had tried to protect them while preparing them for this reality, but nothing could truly ready a child for such raw hatred. "Some people carry darkness inside them," baby Jasmine replied softly. "Their hatred has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own problems. Never forget that you are perfect exactly as you are." The aircraft touched down with a firm jolt, the reverse thrusters engaging loudly as Captain Wilson brought the plane to a controlled stop. Emergency vehicles immediately began approaching. "Remain seated until given instructions for evacuation," the captain announced. "We do not anticipate needing the emergency slides, but please stay calm and follow crew directions." As the aircraft taxied to its designated area, the cabin filled with the sound of alert tones from dozens of phones as passengers reconnected to cellular networks. Within moments, videos of Derek's behavior were being uploaded to social media platforms, the digital evidence spreading faster than the aircraft had flown. Captain Wilson emerged from the cockpit once the plane was secured, his expression grave as he surveyed the cabin. "First-class passengers, please remain seated. Local authorities will be boarding shortly." The main cabin door opened, and two uniformed airport police officers entered, followed by a man in a dark suit who identified himself as FBI Agent Reynolds. "We've received reports of an assault on minors and potential civil rights violations aboard this aircraft," Agent Reynolds announced. "We need statements from involved parties and witnesses." Derek Harrison stood from his jump seat, straightening his uniform. "I followed all proper protocols for passenger management during an emergency. These allegations are completely unfounded." Captain Wilson turned to Derek with undisguised contempt. "That's not what the cabin footage shows, Mr. Harrison." He then addressed Agent Reynolds. "The aircraft's security system recorded the entire incident. I've already instructed that the footage be preserved as evidence." Derek's face paled. In his blind rage, he had forgotten about the cabin security cameras installed after 9/11. Agent Reynolds approached the Robinson family, his demeanor softening slightly. "Ma'am, are you and your children all right? Do you need medical attention?" "My daughter Maya was spat on," Jasmine replied quietly, "and Zara's arm may be bruised from being grabbed." The officer nodded gravely. "We'll have paramedics examine them, and we'll need your statement when you're ready." Eleanor Thompson stood from her seat. "I witnessed everything, officer. So did most of the passengers in this section. We all have video evidence as well." Murmurs of agreement rose from surrounding passengers, many holding up their phones to indicate they had documentation. Agent Reynolds turned to Derek. "Mr. Harrison, please come with us." As Derek was escorted from the aircraft, his final glance at Jasmine and her daughters contained no remorse, only bitter resentment. The man still couldn't recognize his own prejudice, even as it had destroyed his career in a matter of hours. Once Derek had been removed, paramedics boarded to check the Robinson family and other passengers who might need assistance. A woman in a corporate blazer with the airline's logo hurried aboard, introducing herself as Veronica Miller, Vice President of Customer Relations. "Dr. Robinson, on behalf of the airline, I want to express our deepest apologies for what you and your daughters experienced," she said, her voice sincere. "What happened today is completely contrary to our values and policies." Jasmine met the executive's eyes steadily. "This isn't about an apology, Miss Miller. This is about a systemic failure that allowed someone like Derek Harrison to remain in a position of authority, despite what I suspect is a history of similar behavior." Veronica Miller's slight wince confirmed Jasmine's suspicion. "We're initiating a full investigation, including a review of all previous complaints involving Mr. Harrison." "I want your assurance that this investigation won't be buried," Jasmine pressed. "My daughters deserve justice, as do any other passengers who have suffered discrimination aboard your aircraft." "You have my personal guarantee," Veronica promised. "We'll be transparent throughout the process." Captain Wilson approached, having completed his immediate post-landing duties. "Dr. Robinson, I owe you an apology as well. As captain, the safety and dignity of everyone aboard is ultimately my responsibility." "You intervened when it mattered most," Captain Jasmine acknowledged. "Thank you for that." The captain nodded, then knelt to address the triplets directly. "Maya, Zara, Imani, you were extremely brave today. As a pilot, I get to decide who receives special recognition, and I believe you three have earned these." He reached into his pocket and produced 3 sets of pilot's wings pins. The girls' eyes widened as he placed the pins in their hands, a small gesture of respect that contrasted sharply with the treatment they had received from Derek. "Are we still going to Boston, Mommy?" Imani asked quietly. "The airline is arranging continuation flights for all passengers," Veronica Miller interjected. "For you and your daughters, Dr. Robinson, we'd like to offer our corporate jet to complete your journey to Boston. It's the least we can do after what you've experienced." As paramedics examined, the girls and FBI agents began taking statements from passengers. A sense of justice being served permeated the cabin. What Derek Harrison had intended as an expression of power over those he deemed inferior had instead become a turning point. Not just for the Robinson family, but potentially for an entire airline's approach to diversity and passenger treatment. Outside the aircraft, news vans were already gathering their satellite dishes extended. The story was spreading rapidly across social media platforms, hashtags forming, and communities rallying around yet another documented instance of discrimination in American life. For Jasmine Robinson and her daughters, the ordeal wasn't over. There would be statements to give, perhaps testimony in court, and the emotional processing of trauma. But in this moment, surrounded by strangers who had become allies, there was also a powerful lesson being learned. When good people stand together against injustice, change becomes possible. The next few hours passed in a blur for the Robinson family. After being examined by paramedics who documented the red marks on Zara's arm and took samples of the dried saliva from Maya's cheek, they were escorted to a private lounge in Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. FBI agents conducted thorough interviews with Jasmine and with special care her daughters. "Maya, can you tell me exactly what happened when Mr. Harrison got angry at you?" asked Agent Sophia Chen, a specialist in interviewing child witnesses. She sat at Maya's level, her voice gentle but not condescending. Maya straightened her shoulders, displaying the same composure that had marked her throughout the ordeal. "I was trying to protect my sister, because he was hurting her arm. I pulled on his sleeve and said, 'Let my sister go.' Then he turned around and spit right at my face. It landed here." She pointed to her cheek just below her right eye. "It was really gross and scary." Agent Chen nodded, making notes. "You were very brave to stand up for your sister. Did Mr. Harrison say anything when he did that?" "He said, 'Don't you dare touch me.'" Maya recalled her voice, small but clear. Across the room, Jasmine watched the interview while providing her own statement to Agent Reynolds. Her heart swelled with pride at her daughter's composure, even as anger burned in her chest at what they had been forced to endure. Dr. Robinson, Agent Reynolds said, redirecting her attention, "In your opinion, was this incident racially motivated?" Jasmine met his gaze directly. "Without question. From the moment we boarded, Derek Harrison treated us differently from white passengers. He checked our first-class tickets multiple times, skipped us during beverage service, ignored my daughter's ear pain, prevented another child from using the bathroom, and ultimately physically assaulted them while using language, with clear racial undertones. This wasn't subtle discrimination, Agent Reynolds. This was overt racism." The agent nodded, continuing to take detailed notes. "We'll be reviewing all passenger videos along with the aircraft security footage. The airline has already provided Mr. Harrison's employment record, which includes 3 previous complaints of alleged discriminatory treatment that were filed but apparently not adequately addressed." This confirmation of her suspicions didn't surprise Jasmine, though it deepened her determination to see systemic changes. Outside the private lounge, the story was exploding across media platforms. Passengers had uploaded their videos to social media, where they quickly went viral. National news networks had picked up the story with headlines reading, "Flight Attendant Assaults Black Children and Racism at 30000 Feet Airline Under Fire." Within the airport, a crowd of reporters had gathered, held back by airport security, but eager for statements from anyone involved in the incident. Eleanor Thompson, who had become an unexpected ally to the Robinson family, agreed to speak with several journalists, her aristocratic bearing and articulate manner making her an ideal witness. "What I witnessed today was nothing short of appalling," she told a CNN reporter. "A grown man in a position of authority targeted 3 perfectly behaved children because of their race. When their mother, a distinguished physician, attempted to protect them, he escalated to physical assault. If this can happen to a successful professional woman and her children in first class, imagine what happens to those without such resources or visibility." Meanwhile, in another part of the airport, Derek Harrison was facing the consequences of his actions. Seated in an airport security office, he listened as FBI agents read him his rights and formally charged him with assault on a minor interference with flight crew duties and civil rights violations. "This is ridiculous," he protested. "Those children were disruptive during an emergency situation. I was ensuring flight safety. Agent Lopez, who had been reviewing the security footage on a tablet, turned the screen toward Derek. Is this what ensuring safety looks like, Mr. Harrison? He asked, playing the clip of Derek spitting on Maya. Because to me it looks like assault on an 8-year-old girl. Derek fell silent, the reality of his situation finally beginning to sink in. Back in the private lounge, airline executives had arrived from the company's headquarters, having flown in specifically to address the crisis. The CEO himself, Richard Blackwell, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a grave expression, sat across from Jasmine. Dr. Robinson, words cannot express how deeply sorry we are for what you and your daughters experienced, he began. I want you to know that Derek Harrison has been terminated effective immediately. That's just the beginning, Jasmine replied evenly. This incident represents a systemic failure in your company's training and accountability systems. Blackwell nodded, not attempting to defend the indefensible. You are absolutely right, which is why I'm here personally. We're implementing immediate changes, including a comprehensive review of all discrimination complaints filed against our staff over the past 5 years, mandatory bias training for all customer-facing employees, and the creation of a passenger advocacy office specifically focused on ensuring equitable treatment. Those are good first steps, Jasmine acknowledged, but I'll be watching closely to ensure these aren't empty promises meant to weather a PR storm. I understand your skepticism, Blackwell replied, which is why we'd like to invite you to serve as a consultant on our newly formed Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Board. Your perspective as both a medical professional and as someone who has experienced discrimination firsthand would be invaluable. Before Jasmine could respond, her phone buzzed with an incoming call from Boston Children's Hospital. She excused herself to take it. Dr. Robinson, this is Dr. Margaret Chen. We've seen the news. Are you and your daughters all right? We're managing, Jasmine replied. But we're still in Cleveland. I don't think we'll make it to Boston in time for my presentation tomorrow. Your presentation is the least of our concerns right now, Dr. Chen assured her. The conference organizers have already rescheduled you for the final day, and we've issued a statement supporting you and condemning what happened. Your research is too important to go unshared because of this incident. After finishing the call, Jasmine returned to find that more allies had arrived. Gabriela Rodriguez, the flight attendant who had stood up for them during the flight, had come to check on the family after completing her required post-emergency duties. I just wanted to make sure you and your girls were okay, Gabriela said, her expression sincere, and to tell you that I've provided my statement to the FBI and will be testifying if this goes to court. Thank you for everything you did, Jasmine replied, embracing the woman. You put your own job at risk to protect my daughters. I did what any decent person should do, Gabriela responded simply. And I'm not worried about my job. The union representative has already confirmed they'll support me fully. As evening approached, arrangements were finalized for the Robinsons' continued journey to Boston. True to their word, the airline had prepared their corporate jet for the short flight. Before leaving the lounge, Jasmine gathered her daughters close. Are you sure you still want to go to Boston? We could go home instead. No one would blame us. The triplets exchanged glances, seeming to communicate silently, as they often did. We want to go to Boston, Maya stated firmly. You have important doctor stuff to share. And we still haven't seen Snow, added Imani. Plus, Zara concluded we can't let mean people stop us from doing important things. Jasmine hugged them tightly, her eyes filling with tears of pride. At 8 years old, her daughters already understood a fundamental truth about confronting discrimination. That retreating only empowers those who seek to marginalize others. As they were escorted through a private airport exit toward the waiting corporate jet, they passed a television showing coverage of the incident. The hashtag number Justice for Robinsons was trending nationwide, and protests were forming outside the airline's headquarters in multiple cities. What had begun as a traumatic personal experience was transforming into something larger, a catalyst for conversation and potentially meaningful change. Though the Robinsons hadn't asked for this spotlight, they recognized the responsibility that came with it. The sleek corporate jet awaited them on the tarmac, its engines humming in preparation for departure. As they climbed the stairs, Jasmine paused to look back at the terminal building where their ordeal had reached its climax. In the fading light of evening, she made a silent promise, not just to her daughters, but to all the unseen travelers who had faced similar discrimination. Without cameras, recording, or witnesses speaking up, this time would be different. This time, accountability would follow. The door closed behind them, and minutes later, the jet was airborne, carrying the Robinson family toward Boston and toward whatever came next in their unexpected journey from victims to advocates. 6 months later, the United States District Court for the Northern District of Ohio fell silent as Judge Elaine Harmon entered the courtroom. The gallery was packed with observers, including numerous journalists, civil rights advocates, and airline industry representatives. In the front row sat Jasmine Robinson, elegant in a navy suit flanked by her triplet daughters in matching dresses, their hair styled in neat braids with blue ribbons. "All rise," announced the bailiff. The Honorable Judge Elaine Harmon presiding in the case of United States versus Derek Harrison. The proceedings today marked the conclusion of a legal journey that had captured national attention. After multiple delays and failed attempts to have charges reduced, Derek Harrison was finally facing sentencing after being convicted on all counts: assault on a minor interference with flight crew duties and civil rights violations. Harrison stood at the defense table significantly diminished from the arrogant figure who had terrorized the Robinson family 6 months earlier. His attorney placed a steadying hand on his arm as Judge Harmon reviewed the case documents. "Mr. Harrison," Judge Harmon began, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed courtroom, "this court has rarely encountered a case where an individual in a position of public trust has so blatantly abused that trust. Your actions aboard Flight 1382 were not just unprofessional, they were cruel, discriminatory, and criminal." Harrison stared at the floor as the judge continued. "What makes your actions particularly disturbing is that they were directed at children. 3 young girls whose only offense was traveling while black. The evidence presented in this case, including multiple video recordings and testimony from dozens of witnesses, paints a clear picture of targeted harassment escalating to physical assault." Judge Harmon paused, glancing toward the Robinson family before continuing. "Before I pronounce sentence, I'll hear victim impact statements. Dr. Robinson, would you like to address the court?" Jasmine rose gracefully, approaching the podium. Her composure was remarkable as she faced her daughter's assailant. "Your Honor, 6 months ago, my daughters experienced something no child should ever face: being targeted, humiliated, and physically assaulted because of their race. Maya Zara and Imani were excited about their first flight, about seeing snow in Boston, about watching their mother present research that could help save children's lives. Instead, they received a harsh lesson about the reality of racism in America." She paused, gathering herself before continuing. "But they also learned something powerful that day. They learned that when good people witness injustice, they can stand together against it. Every passenger who recorded what happened, every witness who came forward, Captain Wilson who intervened, Gabriella who risked her job to protect my children, they all demonstrated that humanity and decency can prevail over hatred." Jasmine turned slightly toward Harrison, though she addressed her words to the judge. "I don't seek vengeance today. What I seek is accountability and change. Mr. Harrison's actions reflect broader systemic issues that must be addressed. My daughters and I have chosen to transform our trauma into advocacy, and we will continue that work regardless of today's sentence." As Jasmine returned to her seat, Judge Harmon nodded with respect before turning back to the defendant. "Mr. Harrison, do you have anything to say before sentencing?" Harrison cleared his throat awkwardly. "Your Honor, I was doing my job as I understood it. The safety of the aircraft was my primary concern." "Stop," Judge Harmon interrupted, her tone sharp. "The evidence has thoroughly disproven that defense. This is your opportunity for genuine remorse, not continued justification." Harrison fell silent. offering nothing further. Judge Harmon straightened the papers before her. Derek Harrison, this court sentences you to 18 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. Additionally, you are permanently barred from employment in the transportation sector, and you will complete 200 hours of community service specifically related to racial justice initiatives. You will also pay restitution to the Robinson family in the amount determined by previous civil proceedings. The gavel struck, finalizing the sentence. As Harrison was led away by court officers, the Robinson family embraced each other, their expressions reflecting not joy but solemn satisfaction that justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. Jasmine, with her daughters beside her, addressed the gathered media. "Today marks an important step toward accountability, but our work isn't finished," she stated. "In the months since our experience, we've established the Robinson Family Foundation for Equality in Transportation, which will work to ensure that all travelers are treated with dignity regardless of their race, gender, religion, or ability." The foundation, funded largely by the substantial settlement from the airline, had already begun making an impact. Working alongside civil rights organizations and industry leaders, they had developed training protocols now being implemented by multiple airlines and transportation companies nationwide. The incident had catalyzed other significant changes as well. The airline had completely overhauled its approach to diversity and anti-discrimination efforts, creating a comprehensive training program named the Triplet Protocol, in honor of Maya, Zara, and Imani. More importantly, they had established transparent accountability systems for reporting and addressing discriminatory behavior with independent oversight to ensure complaints weren't buried or minimized. Gabriela Rodriguez had been promoted to senior cabin crew trainer specializing in bias prevention and cultural sensitivity. Her courage in standing up to Derek Harrison had transformed her into a respected leader within the company, empowered to shape the next generation of flight attendants. Eleanor Thompson, the elderly passenger who had been the first to speak up during the flight, had become an unexpected but powerful ally and friend to the Robinson family. Her background as the widow of a commercial airline pilot gave her unique credibility as she advocated for systemic change within the industry. At 78, she had found a new purpose, often accompanying Jasmine to speaking engagements and industry conferences. As the media briefing concluded, a familiar face approached. Captain Anthony Wilson, who had commanded Flight 1382 and intervened at a critical moment. "Dr. Robinson," he greeted her warmly, "I thought you might like to know that the airline's new Executive Diversity Committee met yesterday. They've approved funding for 10 scholarships for minority students pursuing careers in aviation, named in honor of your daughters." "That's wonderful news," Captain Jasmine replied, genuinely touched by the development. "Also," he added with a smile, "I've been appointed the new Director of Flight Operations, which gives me direct input into crew training and standards. I promise you what happened on our flight won't happen again. Not on my watch." The Robinson family's journey home from the courthouse was quieter, allowing them time to process the day's events and the formal conclusion of legal proceedings. Though the case was now closed in the eyes of the law, its impact continued to ripple outward through policy changes, awareness initiatives, and ongoing advocacy. 6 weeks later, the Robinsons found themselves at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, once again preparing for another flight to Boston. This time, Jasmine had been invited to deliver the keynote address at a transportation industry conference on equality and inclusion, a direct outcome of her advocacy work since the incident. The atmosphere was markedly different from their previous trip. As they approached the first-class check-in counter, the airline staff greeted them by name, having been briefed about their journey. "Dr. Robinson and the Robinson triplets welcome," said the counter agent with genuine warmth. "We're honored to have you flying with us today." The security screening process was professional and respectful, conducted according to protocol, but without the extra scrutiny they had experienced before. As they reached the gate, the boarding process was efficient and courteous, with no questioning of their first-class status. Aboard the aircraft, the chief flight attendant personally welcomed them. "Dr. Robinson, we're very pleased to have you with us today. Girls, is this your second flight? Our fourth, Maya corrected politely. We flew to Washington, D.C. twice to meet with lawmakers about airplane rules. The flight attendant smiled. Well, I have a special surprise for you. Our captain today would like to meet you before we take off. Minutes later, the cockpit door opened and a woman in captain's uniform emerged. Her dark skin gleamed against the crisp white of her shirt, and her natural hair was styled in a neat bun beneath her cap. Good morning. I'm Captain Jessica Washington, she introduced herself, extending her hand first to Jasmine, and then, with equal respect, to each of the triplets. I wanted to personally welcome you aboard. You're the captain, Zara asked, her eyes wide with wonder. I am Captain Washington, confirmed with a smile. One of still too few black female captains in commercial aviation, but our numbers are growing. She knelt to the triplets' level, her expression becoming more serious. I wanted you to know that your story inspired me. I was a first officer when I saw the news about what happened to you. It reminded me why representation matters in every part of this industry. 3 months later, I completed my captain's certification. Now I make sure every flight I command is one where every passenger feels respected and safe, regardless of who they are. Captain Washington reached into her pocket and withdrew 3 small pins different from the standard wings they had received from Captain Wilson. These were miniature captain's wings with tiny diamonds embedded in the metal. These are special wings that are only given to those who show exceptional courage in the face of adversity, she explained carefully, pinning one to each girl's collar. You 3 have earned them many times over. The triplets beamed with pride, touching the sparkling pins with reverent fingers. Maybe one of you will be a pilot someday, Captain Washington suggested. I want to be a doctor like Mommy, Maya replied confidently. I might be a pilot, Zara considered thoughtfully. I want to be a judge, Imani declared, so I can help make things fair. Captain Washington laughed warmly. Whatever you become, you'll be amazing. Now we're ready for takeoff. Enjoy your flight. As the captain returned to the cockpit and the plane prepared for departure, Jasmine looked at her daughters with overwhelming love and pride. The journey that had begun in trauma had transformed into something powerful, a catalyst for change that would benefit countless travelers after them. The aircraft lifted smoothly into the sky, carrying them toward Boston once again, but this time without fear or anxiety. As they rose above the clouds, Jasmine reflected on how their lives had changed in the months since that fateful flight. There had been darkness, yes, but also unexpected light. New allies, opportunities to advocate for change, and most importantly, valuable lessons for her daughters about standing firm in their dignity, even when others tried to diminish them. The triplets gazed out the window, pointing excitedly as they spotted the first snowflakes beginning to fall over Boston in the distance. Their initial dream of seeing snow was finally coming true, but they had gained something far more valuable along the way: the knowledge that justice, while sometimes delayed, was indeed possible, and that their voices, even at 8 years old, had the power to create meaningful change. As the plane began its descent into Boston Logan International Airport, Jasmine knew their story wasn't ending. It was evolving into something even more significant. The Robinson family would continue their advocacy work, speaking truth to power and ensuring that transportation spaces became truly equitable for all travelers. What had begun with fear and injustice had transformed into hope and progress. And as Captain Jessica Washington's voice came over the intercom announcing their arrival in Boston, Jasmine and her daughters exchanged smiles, secure in the knowledge that they had helped create a safer sky for everyone who would follow. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling? How did you respond? Share your stories in the comments below. If you believe every traveler deserves dignity and respect, regardless of their race, gender, or background, please like and subscribe to support more stories of courage and justice. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and remember, when we stand together against injustice, positive change becomes possible. Safe travels to all. This powerful story reminds us that racism persists in everyday spaces, even where professionalism should prevail. Dr. Robinson and her daughters experienced what many Black Americans face daily: prejudice, masked as protocol and safety concerns. Yet their story teaches several crucial lessons. First, documentation matters. The passengers' recordings, aircraft footage, and witness statements transformed a potentially dismissed incident into undeniable evidence. Technology has become a powerful tool against discrimination. Second, allies make a difference. When Eleanor Gabriella, Captain Wilson, and fellow passengers spoke up, they demonstrated that bystanders need not be silent. Their intervention created immediate safety and long-term accountability. Third, systemic change requires both accountability and reform. Derek faced legal consequences, but true justice came through policy changes, new training programs, and industry-wide reforms. Finally, the Robinson family showed that resilience isn't just about surviving trauma. It's about transforming it into advocacy. By establishing their foundation and sharing their story, they created a legacy of protection for future travelers. The journey from victim to advocate is never easy, but when brave individuals stand firm in their dignity and demand better, they light the path toward a more just society for everyone.